Round about 87 years ago, our daddies done brought forth upon this here continent a new nation. They conceived that some bitch in liberty, and they dedicated that motherfucker to the proposition that all men's be created equal. Now we engaged in a big old motherfucker of a civil war testing whether that nation or any nation that be conceived and dedicated that way can last very goddamn long. We met here on a great big old battlefield of that war, and the reason we done met here is to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for them brave cracker-ass motherfuckers who done gave their lives so this here nation might live. Is it altogether fitting and proper that we should be doing this? You bet your sweet ass it is. But, in a bigger sense than all that, we can't be dedicating, we can't be consecrating, we damn sure can't be hallowing this here ground. Them brave cracker-ass motherfuckers, the live ones and the dead ones who done they struggling here, they done consecrated that shit way the hell above any old power we got to add or detract. The world ain't gonna notice all that much, and it ain't gonna remember all that long what we say in here, but it can't never forget what they done here. It's for us, the live motherfuckers, to be dedicating ourselves here to the work that these brave crackers begun but didn't get to finish because they got dead. Nah, it's for us here to be dedicated to the great big task we got remaining before us. That from these badass dead men we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. We dialing that shit up to 11, baby. That we here highly resolved that these brave dead peckerwood crackers, they ain't gonna die in vain. That this nation under Almighty God is gonna have a new birth of freedom. And that government of the peoples, by the peoples, for the peoples, ain't gonna perish from the earth. I'm Black George Washington, America's baby daddy. See you next time. Peace out, bitches.
From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where it's episode number 420, and I don't even have a funny weed joke for you. That's how worthless I am. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant. And what would you say if I told you the most interesting naval battle of the American Civil War took place off the coast of northwest France? Granted, if you're a hardcore Civil War aficionado, you probably knew that already, but if you're not, you may enjoy the upcoming story. We don't think of our Civil War as having that much of a naval component to it, and when we do think of naval engagements, we normally think of the same few things. We think of the Battle of Hampton Roads, which wasn't that much of a battle, really. I mean, it's historically significant because it was the first time two ironclads ever attempted to fight each other, but as a practical matter, each of those vessels was more dangerous to her own crew than she was to the enemy, and then the battle, such as it was, consisted of some maneuvering and a bit of wild, haphazard gunnery. We think of Admiral Farragut plowing into New Orleans like a bat out of hell, damn the torpedoes, full steam ahead, that whole thing. But that wasn't even a battle so much as a commander doing something suicidally reckless and improbably getting away with it. And aside from those two things, we mostly think of rebel blockade runners trying to defeat the Union naval blockade. But when it comes to commerce raiding, our Civil War really did have sort of a global component to it. The Union and the Confederacy were both eager to interdict each other's shipping on the high seas, and so they did, often with a fair amount of success. But out of all the vessels in all the wars ever fought on this planet, which one had the most distinguished commerce raiding track record? That would be CSS Alabama, under the command of Captain Raphael Semmes, and her scorecard isn't impressive just because she burned or sank 65 Union vessels during her brief 22 months of active service, but because in one of the most improbable achievements in the history of armed conflict, as far as I'm concerned, she accomplished it all without any loss of life or serious injury, either among her own crew or the crews of the enemy ships that she sent to the bottom. You see, Captain Raphael Semmes was very serious about the distinction between commerce raiding and piracy. So we're going to do our commerce rating in the most gentlemanly and civilized way that commerce rating can be done. Before we burn or sink or capture anybody, we are going to make sure the crew is safely on board our own ship, and we're going to treat them with the utmost courtesy as we convey them to the nearest neutral port to be dropped off. And there will be no taking of spoils or booty. The ships we capture, we will burn and or sink, and we will send them to the bottom with all of their contents intact, because, I say again, we are not fucking pirates, and we won't act like fucking pirates. But it takes more than a good captain and a good crew to make a historically successful career in commerce rating. You need a ship that can get the job done, and CSS Alabama was just about the best commerce raider you could build in 1862, and she, without a doubt, was the newest and most advanced vessel in the Confederate fleet. Built in secret by John Laird and Company in Liverpool. Why in secret? Well, the intercourse between Britain and America during the Civil War is a pretty complicated, multifaceted thing, but the long and short of it is, the Brits did their best to play both sides without pissing anybody off too much. They took no official position on the outcome of the war, but they maintained their normal diplomatic relations with Washington, while assiduously avoiding doing anything that could be potentially perceived as officially recognizing the existence of the Confederacy. The Trent affair notwithstanding, but that story requires a whole other video. There was still lots of commerce between Britain and the South, but it was all done through private channels, and everybody in Westminster did their best to pretend none of it was happening. I'm sorry, we are just so hooked on your delicious cotton, we can't help it. It's so much snugglier than wool. It's not our fault. As far as naval matters go, it was against the law for British shipbuilders to build warships for foreign nations unless it was being done pursuant to an act of parliament. But there was a loophole in the law, whereby you could actually build a warship for any damn buddy you like, even a private individual. You just need to take it outside of British territorial waters before any of the armaments are actually installed. And so that's how the building and delivery of CSS Alabama were accomplished. The rebel government sends a check to one of their men in England. That guy goes and orders the ship in his own name. The shipyard does everything except install the guns. And they take her 12 miles off the coast, safely into international waters, to finish fitting her out and deliver her to Captain Semmes. Hey, isn't that a Confederate Navy uniform you're wearing? And here I thought we were building this vessel for some private individual. What a surprise this is! For her general characteristics, Alabama was 220 feet from stem to stern, a beam of 31 foot 8, draft 17 foot 8. She displaced 1,050 tons burthen. Her full complement was 145 officers and men. More on that in a moment. She's a three-masted sloop of war, so obviously, since this is freaking 1862 after all, her main propulsion is still, like nearly all ocean-going vessels of the period, wind and sail. But she's also got a 2-cylinder, 300-horsepower steam engine under the hood, which enables her, when the need arises, to make 13 knots instead of the normal 11 knots that she can make under sail alone, which makes all the difference in the commerce rating business in 1862. You're never using this engine for main propulsion. I mean, 300 horsepower is pretty good if you're a sports car, but it won't push you very fast on its own if you're a 1,000-ton sloop of war. What it does do is enable you to close with and overtake your quarry, cross his bow, train your guns on him, smile and wave, and demand his orderly surrender. Because it's still pretty rare at this stage for ships on the high seas to be equipped with engines. Paddle wheel riverboats are becoming more and more common by this time. Motorized tugboats exist to some extent, but this is still only about 15 years since putting steam engines aboard ships was first attempted, and it's really not until the 1890s that steam propulsion technology reaches the point where you can comfortably attempt an intercontinental voyage in a big ship on steam power alone and not care enough to bring any sails with you. So in terms of the kinds of vessels she is going to be hunting, Alabama is an even match with them in terms of size and sailing characteristics, but being able to fire up that engine and squeeze out those extra 2 knots when you need them makes the whole thing academic. How do you sink 65 enemy ships in under 2 years in the age of sail? By having that little rinky-dink steam engine and the extra 2 knots it gives you. But you know what else you need to run a warship? You need a damn crew. And Captain Raphael Semmes doesn't have one of those when he arrives in international waters off the coast of northern England. to take delivery of his new ship. All he's really got is himself and about half a dozen of his senior officers, so he has to try and recruit a crew of around 140 men, give or take, and the only men he has got to choose from are whoever happens to be present at this little makeshift flotilla somewhere off the coast of Liverpool. The guys who are engaged in the fitting out of the ship and the installation of the guns. Guys who are not, most of them, even sailors at all. These are just guys who work in the shipyard. Tradesmen, most of them. For some, this was probably the first time they had ever even been to sea. So Captain Semmes has to come up with a hell of a good sales pitch. Pronto! All right, how would y'all like to go and kill some dastardly Yankee aggressors? Doesn't that sound fun? What do you say? Yeah, no thanks, mate. I think I'd rather go home and have a bath. And besides, we don't see much difference between the Union and the rebels. You guys are all Yanks to us. All right, fine then. Forget about the appeal to patriotic bloodlust. What if I pay you twice as much as you make in the shipyard? No, mate, I don't think so. See, the attractive part of working at the shipyard is you get to go home after work. And besides, do you know that we're not even sailors? Now, look, that's not important now. I need a whole shitload of men, and you guys are the only men present, so I will up the ante. The hell with your shipyard wage. What if I pay you double what the Royal Navy pays its sailors? All right, mate. Let me run you through this one more time. I've got a job I like. I've got a house I like. I can even tolerate my wife and kids most of the time. But you, Mr. Haughty-toddy rebel Navy captain, you think you can just rub a couple shillings together and convince me to go die in the service of some foreign navy? All right, fine then. I'll give you triple what the Royal Navy pays. You got yourself a deal, Captain. Go tell the band to strike up Dixie. Let's go murder those Yankee fucks. But just consider how much more improbable Alabama's track record of success is in light of the fact that she was being manned by a crew of mostly British, non-professional sailors. So it's a singular achievement by Semmes and his officers that they managed to take a bunch of carpenters and blacksmiths and transform them into able seamen, which is to say, as long as they never actually had to fire their guns, they did really great, right up until the one time they did have to fire their guns. On that fateful day off the coast of Cherbourg, on Sunday, June 1864, when, in her one and only battle action, she was sent to the bottom with extreme prejudice by USS Kearsarge, Captain John Winslow commanding, in a little under an hour. Which is to say, although Semmes and his officers did a yeoman's job of training up these men to effectively sail the ship, they never did learn the finer points of naval gunnery, and it really showed when she wound up in an evenly matched engagement with a crew of professional U.S. Navy personnel. This was also, as you might expect, the point at which Alabama's spotless casualty record came to a rather ignominious end. For after having sunk or burned 65 enemy vessels without the loss of life or limb, 1/7 of her crew winds up perishing in the Battle of Cherbourg, with another 21 wounded and 70 captured, against 1 dead and 2 wounded on the Union side, which is to say, it was a pretty thorough ass-kicking. It was also probably the closest a naval battle has ever come to being a spectator sporting event. You see, Alabama was trying to quickly duck into Cherbourg unnoticed to effect some much-needed repairs and refitting, but Kearsarge was already on her trail. She knew exactly where she was, and it was just a matter, not unlike Trafalgar 150 years previously, of just waiting around for the enemy to venture out of port and get what he's got coming to him. Which was about 5 or 6 days in the event, during which time the word went out far and wide around the Cherbourg area that, hey, there's going to be an American naval battle. Let's go watch. It'll be fun. And so there were tens of thousands of people camped out on the coastline watching the whole thing go down. Alabama is escorted out of the harbor by a French Navy frigate whose job is to ensure that no fisticuffs take place inside France's territorial waters. And the events of the day, having been witnessed by so many Frenchmen, it sort of carves its own weird little niche into their regional historical culture. They are still singing folk songs today about that time the Northern Yanks and the Southern Yanks had themselves a right proper naval battle right outside Cherbourg. In the final analysis, I think it's unfortunate that Alabama has come to be defined more by her inglorious end than by her stellar career that preceded it. For in the opinion of this reporter, there is no surface vessel in history that can match her resume in the sphere of commerce rating. Even if you include freaking U-boats, she is still in the conversation, and that's absurd. It's saying a hell of a lot about the kind of commander that Raphael Semmes was, as is the fact that no Navy captain in time of war ever treated his vanquished enemies with more generosity than this guy and his crew did. Did he lose rather badly in the only actual battle he fought? Yeah, he sure as hell did. But do I think that still, in spite of that, he belongs on the list of greatest American naval commanders? I sure as hell do. Even though the ships he sunk and burned were American ships? Yes, because in terms of warfare on land, does any serious military historian dispute that men like Robert E. Lee, Thomas Jackson, Jeb Stuart, Nathan Bedford Forrest, Tecumseh, Black Hawk, Crazy Horse, Geronimo, and Sitting Bull, all of whom made war against the government of the United States, belong on the list of greatest American generals? No, of course they don't dispute that, nor should they. And I don't think it should be any different with naval commanders, frankly. Thanks very much indeed for watching. See you next time. Have a great day and a pleasant tomorrow. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.